Well, hello, traders and investors. I'm L.A. Little, and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets, and we do it from a neoclassical perspective. And what does that mean? That means every day we look at it, and we ask the market, what are you telling us? What happened today, and what does it tell us about the coming ones? Do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday. It's broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time. It's archived on YouTube. It's available under the channel L.A. Little. And when we look at what happened today, today was one of those classic days where, I'm sure there's going to be people that are saying it was a capitulation day, and it could easily have been that. So let's first look at what's driving it, which is what we looked at last night, which is the oil market. And for the lack of a better chart here, kind of ignore all this stuff, a bunch of news items. The thing I want to focus on is this piece right here, right? This spike down. You went from just over 29 to 27.5 almost. That spike, middle of the day, that is what drove the markets. If you look intraday on the markets, you're going to see the exact same sort of a spike down. And then you're going to see the markets spike right back up, right along with crude oil on the way back up. Now, the markets, to be fair, really continued the spike when crude oil kind of went sideways there for a little bit. But once it got going, right, the markets really got the spike going. And if you look at this now, you kind of got this little, head and shoulders, if you want to do the old classical stuff, right, kind of a head and shoulders bottom situation here with a neckline up here somewhere. Oil can go back up at this point, can go back up into the $30.5, $31 range. And that's going to be a big blessing for this market if, in fact, it does it. So what happened today? Well, huge downdraft, right? You still see it in the numbers over here in the CACs and in the DAX. You see a little rally starting to take place tonight over in Asia. Asia was down huge, 700 points on the Hang Seng last night. The Nikkei was down 700 also, I believe. Our markets, right, down big, and we're talking about down 3.5%. They rallied back because of crude oil. The S&P still closed 1.17% lower, 22 points down. But you came back on the index, you came back on the NASDAQ broad composite, and you actually finished in the green on the Russell. Bonds were up big. They finish up 1%. Gold also up big, finishes up 1%. But those are off their highs, and all that had to do with the reversal. Oil was down 6.5% at one point today, closes down about 1%. That was the day in a capsule. Now, for the fun stuff, let's look at actually what we have. To do that, we're going to start with the S&P 500. Okay, so we're on the daily chart. Big spike down, right? Huge spike to the downside. Volume expands. Now, volume over here was a little bit heavier, and we're going to look at the weekly in a second, but volume expands, right? You get that kind of a low. What does that say? That says you can come back down here and test it again. That's on the daily. Go to the weekly. On the weekly, you're testing into the October lows, which we'll look at here in a second on the monthly, but you're also testing still this August low because we're on a weekly. And if you look at this closely, right, we're almost at break even on those August lows here. Today's Wednesday. You have 2 more days. Probably going to get a continuation rally tonight or tomorrow, and have a decent shot of closing back above this. Now, this is only a 2-day week. Here you had 5 days, so you got to kind of do the calculations. And if you look at this number, you get about 113. Divide that out, you got about 55. 55 times 5 gives you about 2 1/4, about 245. And then you come back over here and you got 260. So unless the volume expands even more, which I suspect it's not going to. I suspect it's actually going to decrease the last couple of days. That is going to be a successful test if you close back over it on the weekly, which would be Friday's close. So in other words, the point here is that the market is telling you what? It's telling you that you don't have willing sellers at lower and lower price points. So if the sellers are unwilling to sell at lower and lower price points, then they're not going to keep going lower. And that comes especially true, right, when you look at the kind of decline we've already seen. If you move out, I'm going to move out to the monthly now. If you move out here on the monthly, we're down 9% as of today, this month. We were down at the lows today almost 13% or 12%. Those lows now, look at the lows, 1812. You went all the way back to the October lows at 1820 on the S&P 500. So you're at the S&P 500 October lows 2014. You're testing them. The lows there are doing about 946. The lows here are doing 587 already. So here you're going to have more volume on the monthly. So the scenario is monthly will have more volume on the October test, but probably less volume on this August test. But on the monthly, right, that's not a swing point low. And so it doesn't carry quite as much weight. So what does that tell us? It tells us more than likely somewhere down the road we're going to come back here again. So that's that piece of the story. Now, if we fast forward back to that weekly, the weekly is going to tell us, if we stay over this, that we successfully tested on a weekly, which means we're going to bounce. So that's the way this is set up. I wanted to take my time and run you through it so you understand what it's doing. And I suspect you're going to see that continuation bounce come tomorrow. And if we look at the other indexes, we'll look at the NASDAQ next. Now the NASDAQ and the others, you got the same situation here on the daily. On the weekly, the NASDAQ didn't quite test that October low, and it's not going to have as much volume either. And if you go out to the monthly, that's the low there, the October low. I think I said October, the August low. The October low is even farther down. It's not going to get down there. IndieX, same story. I'm going to go to the Russell next. Now the Russell is one of the key ones at this point. Same thing here. It actually reversed and closed up today. On the weekly, August lows versus the lows now, no contest. I doubt seriously it's going to get back to those. The test on the monthly is where the Russell test is, and that monthly test is on the October lows. And so if we look at those October lows, 2014, right, it's doing the test here. The volume there is about 9.5, and you're doing 5.8. So again, you're going to have more volume when you expand it out to 5 days on the Russell. The key is do you save that and come back later, or do you actually break it now? That's the key. The number's 1040. We're sitting at 999, I believe. So you got to pick up 40 points. So you got to pick up another 4% by the end of the month, which is about 6 more trading days. That's a huge test, and that's a hard test. As a matter of fact, that's the hardest test that's out there. Speaking of test, let's take a look at the sectors. And I want to draw your attention to 2 key sectors, both of which are testing also on the monthly. This is the monthly on the financials, trying to break this swing point low. It's only got to get up another % or so by the end of the month. That's doable. Not going to have the volume, it looks like, probably at the end of the month. That would be a successful test. And if I move over to the industrials and look at the monthly on it, you can see here the same situation. It's almost back over it and also will not have the volume. So on the monthly, and why is the monthly important? Well, if we go to our resources, pull up the market trends, and bring these trends up and take a look at them here, right? This is the critical spot. You've got 2 bearish scenarios already. That's the basic materials and the energy. You don't want to see another one change. If another one changes here, more than likely, that's going to signal that this top is probably in. So it's a big deal at this point. You go from the short term to the intermediate term to the long term. If these start to change, then these eventually start to change, then these eventually start to change. You get 2 or 3 of them, and we've had 2 for a while. That's when you can actually get all of them to start trying to roll over. And these lead those typically. So, you get enough of the sectors change, you'll get the index change, and so forth. And so that's the big picture scenario, and that's why those 3 are the most important ones. Finally, let's flip over. You got Draghi tomorrow. That's going to set the tone probably in Europe. What he says or what he does will be a big deal, and we'll have to see how that plays out. But if we look at the German DAX, what it says is it's probably going to try to work higher. You see it here on the daily, doesn't mean anything, but if you go to the weekly, assuming the DAX can hold this price point, and it looks like it will, both on volume and potentially on price, it's going to test into this low again. It's already tested it once, and it looks like it's going to try to hold it. If it does, this thing's going to bounce right back just like everything else. It had already finished, and I believe I've pointed this out before, it already finished off ABCD structures to the downside here and in other indexes, and so the stage is set to get the bounce. I assume that Draghi's going to say something dovish, maybe even offer some sort of a bone for the market to pick on and try to rally. These markets are going to try to rally off of it. If we look at Asia, it's a little bit of a different story, right? You have Hong Kong, which simply cannot find a bottom. Volume expansion last night. You're underneath the swing point lows on the weekly, and you're under them on the monthly. That's 2 to 3 bars on the longest time frame. And in this case, it's under on the monthly. If it holds under it, it's not going to have the volume. That's going to be the key test here. Is 19,426. You're trading at 18,886, so you got to pick up almost 600 points, 550. Now, 550 it can do in a night. We saw it last night. So that's the key price point on the Hang Seng. If it can hold that price point, you can actually save this market at least for a while. If you look at the Nikkei actually goes down. It's down here trading against these lows. So Nikkei also needs to catch a bounce to do a save. And it probably will because it's coming back into a swing point high. That price point 6,320. You got down to 6,387. It looks to me like it's probably going to do the save here, at least for the month. And finally, Shanghai, which is where a lot of the concern has been. Shanghai actually got over the highs yesterday with more volume. I suspect it's going to probably trade back up there, and on the weekly it also looks like that's the case. That's about it for tonight in terms of time. Tomorrow's going to be a big day again. I expect this volatility is going to continue, but you've got the setup tonight. Last night I said they were probably going to try to hold it and push it higher off that August test. Well, they gapped it down and they capitulated a bunch of folks, and then they take it back up towards the end of the day. My expectation, and it's a lot of this is based on what oil does, but my expectation is they're going to get follow through tomorrow, and they're going to take this back up higher. And the real test is going to be that Russell and those two sectors over the remainder of this month. Folks, thanks for joining me. If you haven't checked out the services we offer, you really should check them out. Get started. You can come in here. You can read about all the things that we do, all the features that we offer, unlimited access to all the tools and the trading advice. And if you really haven't checked these things out, you might want to. Price point is an unbelievable price point. Just $19 a month, 50 cents a day. It's pretty hard to go wrong if you're buying a yearly subscription. What can I say? I don't know that you can't get anything neoclassical anywhere, and you're certainly not going to get that almost in any place for any kind of advice. If your financial future is important to you, then you should really check it out. Have yourself a great night. I'll catch you tomorrow. Good night, folks.